A wealthy man finds a lost girl in the forest and takes her to his disabled mother's house. Upon returning home and entering without knocking, he stumbled upon something unexpected and shocking. Diego Morales, a successful businessman and heir to one of the largest corporations in the country, was driving back to his home after another exhausting day at the office. As the main person responsible for the company his father had founded, he constantly felt the pressure of maintaining the family legacy. Although tired, his mind continued to work, planning the next strategic moves for the company. Outside the corporate environment, Diego was a reserved man, preferring solitude over the complications of social interactions. As he parked his car in the spacious mansion's garage, he let out a deep sigh. The vast, silent house amplified his loneliness. The only person he truly connected with was his mother, Dona Carmen, who was sadly in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's. Crossing the threshold of the door, leaving behind the encroaching dusk, he was greeted by a heavy silence. And before continuing, make sure you're already subscribed to our channel so you won't miss any videos and can keep up with all our emotional stories. "Rosario, I'm home," Diego announced, not expecting a response, knowing the housekeeper had likely already retired to her quarters. However, to his surprise, Rosario appeared in the hallway, looking concerned. "Mr. Diego, I need to talk to you about Mrs. Carmen," she said, her voice hesitant. Diego, anticipating the nature of the conversation, sighed again. "How is she today?" he asked, though he feared the answer. "The same, sir, but she called for you several times today. I think it would be good for you to spend some time with her, even if she doesn't remember later," Rosario suggested. He nodded, feeling the usual guilt for not spending more time with his mother. "I'll go see her now," he said, heading to the room where Dona Carmen spent her days. As he entered the room, Diego found his mother sitting in her chair, staring out the window with a distant look. "Mom, it's me, Diego," he said softly, trying to hide the sadness he felt seeing her in that state. Dona Carmen slowly turned her head, her expression confused for a moment before a brief flash of recognition appeared in her eyes. "Diego?" she murmured, her voice weak but full of affection. "Yes, Mom, it's me. How are you feeling?" he asked, holding her delicate hand. Diego talked briefly with her, even though most of the words were disjointed and confused. To him, every second by his mother's side was a painful reminder of times that would never return. As he left the room, the weight of loneliness fell upon him once again. The mansion, once full of life, now seemed like a mausoleum of memories. Sitting on the sofa in the vast living room, Diego reflected on his life. All his business success couldn't fill the void he felt. Loneliness consumed him, and he couldn't stop wondering if this was the life he was destined to live. Work and caring for his mother. He wanted more but didn't know where or how to find it. That night, after another solitary dinner in the imposing dining room, Diego Morales felt the need to leave the mansion that, with its countless rooms and empty corridors, seemed to imprison him in his own thoughts. The immensity of the house only amplified the emptiness he felt inside. He decided to take a walk through the woods surrounding the property. That natural space offered him an escape, a place where he could breathe freely, away from the pressures and responsibilities he bore. Donning a coat to protect himself from the cold, he headed for the grove, where the fresh air and sounds of nature immediately calmed him, contrasting with the oppressive silence of the mansion. Walking without a defined destination, Diego allowed his thoughts to wander. He reflected on his life, his mother's deteriorating condition, and the loneliness that consumed him. Still, that moment of tranquility was something he longed for. As he moved along the path, the soft moonlight illuminated his way through the trees, while the sound of leaves underfoot and the occasional chirp of a nightbird were the only noises breaking the silence. Diego pondered the simplicity of nature and how, despite being a successful businessman, he yearned for something as simple as the company and understanding of another human being. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a faint, almost imperceptible sound. He stopped, trying to identify its source. It seemed like a low, almost muffled crying. Diego followed the sound until he saw a small figure huddled under a tree. It was a little girl, alone, crying in the middle of the dark woods. He approached cautiously. "Hey, it's okay. What are you doing out here alone?" His voice was gentle, in an attempt not to scare the child. The girl looked up, surprised and a little frightened. "I got lost," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I don't know how to get back home." Diego felt a wave of compassion for the lost child. "Don't worry, I'll help you find your way back. What's your name?" He tried to appear as non-intimidating as possible, kneeling to be at her level. "Isabella," she replied, wiping away her tears. Diego extended his hand. "I'm Diego. Come on, I'll take you home." As they walked side by side, Diego felt a strange sense of purpose. His concern for the lost girl distracted him, even if only for a brief moment, from his own problems. As they advanced along the path that would lead them to a busy avenue from where he assumed she might have come, Diego began to notice, for the first time, the state of Isabella's clothes. Though clean, they were simple and worn, suggesting a reality very different from his own. "Isabella, do you know where your house is? Any direction you remember?" Diego asked, expecting to hear the name of a nearby street or neighborhood. The girl's answer took him by surprise. "My house is a cardboard house. I think it's a bit far from here, in a place where nobody else wants to go. I know where it is, but I don't remember exactly how to get there," she said with a glimmer of pride in her eyes. The girl's innocence and satisfaction with something as precarious as a cardboard house left Diego speechless for a few moments. He tried to process the information, realizing the gravity of the situation. The girl in front of him didn't have a home in the traditional sense, but rather an improvised shelter, exposed to all kinds of dangers. "Do you live there alone?" Diego's concern was evident, and he couldn't hide it in his voice. "Yes, and I like living there. I made it all by myself. I even put a window in it," Isabella replied, unaware of the seriousness of her situation. Diego's chest tightened. He admired the girl's strength and independence, but the idea of letting her return to a place like that deeply troubled him. "Isabella, the nights are cold, and it's already late. How about spending the night at my house? Tomorrow we can check out your cardboard house and think about how to help," Diego proposed, trying to be welcoming without scaring her. Hesitant, she looked at him with some distrust, but a glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden," she said in a timid tone. With a welcoming smile, Diego nodded. "I'm sure, Isabella. Come on, it'll be like an adventure." When they arrived at the mansion, Isabella's reaction was one of pure enchantment. Her eyes widened, and a delighted smile spread across her face. "Wow, this place looks like a fairy tale castle," she exclaimed. Diego couldn't help but smile genuinely, infected by the girl's joy and simplicity. The spontaneity and sincere admiration that Isabella showed were rare in his life. That brief moment brought Diego a sense of happiness that he hadn't felt in a long time. As he led Isabella through the grand entrance, Diego turned to Rosario, the housekeeper, hoping she could manage the unexpected situation. Rosario, always serious and professional, raised her eyebrows in surprise upon seeing the girl beside Diego. "Mr. Diego, what is this? Who is this girl?" she asked, her voice conveying both curiosity and concern. Diego, trying to explain quickly, sought understanding and support. However, Rosario's reaction wasn't what he expected. "Sir, we can't just bring a stranger into the house. She could be sick. She might pose a risk to all of us, especially your mother," Rosario warned, clearly uneasy about the possible consequences of Diego's decision. Rosario's response caught Diego by surprise, and irritation was inevitable. He wasn't used to being questioned in his own home, especially when it came to helping someone in need. "Rosario, I expected more understanding from you. Isabella is just a child who needs help. We can't ignore that," Diego replied firmly. The atmosphere heated up briefly, with Rosario insisting on the risks while Diego defended the need for compassion. In the end, Diego decided to end the discussion. "My decision is final, Rosario. Prepare some clean clothes for Isabella, a warm bath, and a decent meal for tonight," he ordered with a tone that left no room for further discussion. Although reluctant, Rosario had no choice but to agree. "As you wish, sir," she replied reluctantly. Imposing his will in that way wasn't common for Diego, but he knew that, in good conscience, he couldn't do less for Isabella. The housekeeper walked away to carry out the orders, while Diego turned his attention back to the girl, who watched the interaction with a mix of emotions, still a bit confused and in awe. Diego knelt beside Isabella, offering her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, we're going to take care of you," he assured her, trying to calm any fear or anxiety she might be feeling. The girl, still captivated by the grandeur of the house that looked more like a castle, returned the smile, an expression of gratitude and relief softly lighting up her face. In that moment, Diego felt a deep conviction. Regardless of the challenges, helping Isabella was the right choice. Shortly after, Isabella was led to the temporary room that Diego had prepared. To her, that space felt like a true palace. She jumped onto the soft bed, caressing the pillows and exploring every corner with the curiosity and joy typical of a child. "It's bigger than my cardboard house," she exclaimed, laughing as she ran from one side to the other, admiring the grandeur of the room. After a warm bath that chased away the cold and discomfort, Isabella put on the clean and comfortable clothes that Rosario had set out for her. Though simple, to her, the garments felt like festive attire. Sitting on the bed, she devoured the meal she was offered, each bite revealing her deep appreciation and gratitude. When Diego returned to the room to check on her, he found Isabella lying down, her eyes sparkling with happiness and contentment. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, feeling a growing sense of satisfaction seeing how the girl had transformed in such a short time. "Yes, everything is so beautiful and delicious. Thank you so much, Mr. Diego," she replied with a sincerity that deeply touched Diego. "You don't need to call me Mr. Isabella. Just Diego is perfect," he said, sitting at the edge of the bed. The girl nodded, a bit shy, as the reality of her situation began to become clearer. "Diego, can I ask you something? Is this house a real castle?" The childish curiosity lit up her eyes. Diego laughed, charmed by the innocence of the question. "It's not exactly a castle, but it's my home, and tonight it's your home too." He realized how nice it was to have someone to share that big, lonely house with, even if it was just for one night. "How about I tell you a bedtime story?" he suggested, wanting to make her night even more special. Isabella's eyes sparkled with excitement at the idea. "I'd love that," she exclaimed as she snuggled into the soft blankets. Diego chose a book from the shelf and began to read, his voice soft and soothing, filling the room. Isabella listened intently, but slowly her eyes began to close until she fell asleep with a serene smile on her face. As the sun began to light up the room the next morning, Isabella awoke from a deep and comforting sleep, perhaps the most comfortable she had ever experienced. The tranquility of the morning, however, was interrupted by the firm voice of Rosario, the housekeeper, who entered the room without ceremony. pulling back the curtains and announcing that it was time to get up. "Come on, girl, it's time for breakfast," she said in a tone that left no room for discussion. Still sleepy, Isabella rubbed her eyes and asked, "Has Diego already gone to work? And he won't be back until late." Rosario responded directly and coldly, offering no further explanations or comfort. The disappointment was evident on Isabella's face. She had hoped to see Diego that morning, maybe share breakfast with him, imagining a cozy moment like a small, makeshift family. However, realizing that arguing with Rosario would be pointless, she forced herself to get up and get ready for the day, albeit with some reluctance. As she brushed her teeth and dressed herself a bit clumsily, her thoughts were still on Diego and the kindness he had shown. Rosario waited impatiently to lead her to breakfast, a ritual unfamiliar to Isabella. Sitting at the table, she marveled at the abundance and variety of food, something so different from her life of deprivation. However, Rosario's austere presence made the meal lose some of its charm. With her always cold tone, the housekeeper gave clear instructions. "Do not leave the room under any circumstances. I don't have time to look after children," she warned, making it clear that any disobedience would not be tolerated. Isabella nodded, pretending to agree with Rosario's rules. However, inside, she was already planning to explore the mansion as soon as the opportunity arose. The curiosity and desire for adventure were too strong to be contained by strict orders. She imagined the mysteries that the large house might hold, the unknown corners she longed to discover. After breakfast, Rosario escorted Isabella back to the room. The girl felt a mix of anxiety and excitement as she thought about disobeying the rules. She knew that if she was caught, there could be consequences, but the desire to explore Diego's world was irresistible. As soon as Rosario closed the door behind her, Isabella began to plan her next move. With her heart beating faster, Isabella pressed her ear to the door, listening for any sound that might indicate activity in the house. When she heard Rosario's footsteps fading down the corridor, she felt encouraged. She waited a few moments to make sure the housekeeper was far enough away, and with a determined sigh, she carefully opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Diego's mansion was a true labyrinth of discoveries for Isabella. Every corridor and ajar door revealed something new and intriguing. She explored the place with eyes full of curiosity, each step guided by the desire to uncover the secrets of that place. At one moment, she would stop to rummage through drawers filled with old and enigmatic objects. At another, she would peek inside large vases that seemed to hide mysteries. The paintings on the walls, portraying faces of past generations, seemed to follow Isabella with their gazes, and she wondered about the lives and stories of the people depicted in them. Each room Isabella entered seemed to whisper ancient secrets, filling her mind with questions and wonder. During her exploration, she came across a slightly open door that led to Dona Carmen's room. With a mix of curiosity and excitement, Isabella entered, finding the elderly lady sitting in an armchair, staring blankly into space. "Hello?" Isabella said softly as she approached. Dona Carmen turned her face towards the voice, but her eyes showed no sign of recognition or understanding. Trying to start a conversation, Isabella continued, "I'm Isabella. I'm a friend of Diego." But Dona Carmen remained silent, her mind lost in distant, inaccessible memories. Isabella sat beside Dona Carmen, telling stories about the woods, her cardboard house, and how Diego had found her. Although the lady didn't respond, Isabella felt a strange connection, as if her words brought some comfort to the elderly woman. However, restlessness soon overtook Isabella again. The peaceful atmosphere of the room was comforting, but her childish curiosity didn't allow her to stay still for long. Determined to explore what else the space might offer, Isabella began to observe the environment around her. Opening drawers and dressers, Isabella found only everyday objects and some dusty treasures, relics of a past that didn't belong to her. However, none of this satisfied her thirst for adventure. Her eyes finally settled on a large wardrobe in the corner of the room, an imposing piece of furniture that seemed to hold secrets within its carved wood. With hesitant hands, Isabella opened one of the doors, revealing an interior that was, in itself, a true treasure. Inside rested a guitar, with the promise of forgotten melodies, but it was an old notebook that completely captured her attention. Carefully, she took it out of its hiding place, feeling the weight of history in her hands. The pages, yellowed with time, seemed to whisper secrets waiting to be rediscovered. However, the moment of discovery was abruptly interrupted by Rosario's voice echoing in the hallway. Isabella's heart raced, and instinctively, she hid the notebook under her clothes, fearing the housekeeper might take it away from her. When Rosario entered the room and saw her, the reprimand was immediate. "Isabella, what are you doing here? I told you to stay in your room," Rosario exclaimed with evident irritation in her voice. The housekeeper's authority filled the room, making Isabella retreat, guilt and fear written all over her face. "I was just looking," she murmured, knowing there was no excuse that could justify her disobedience. With severity, Rosario led her back to the room, repeating that she shouldn't be exploring the house. "It's not safe, and you shouldn't be touching things that aren't yours," Rosario warned as she escorted her back to the room. The adventure was over for now, but the notebook hidden under her clothes was now a secret Isabella kept to herself, a mystery she was determined to unravel. After returning to her temporary room, Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, now with the old notebook as her own treasure, hidden from Rosario's watchful eyes and reprimands. With her heart still racing from the recent discovery, she carefully opened the notebook, the fragile pages revealing secrets that seemed eager to be uncovered. As she read on, a new world unfolded before her, a world of preserved memories, resisting the relentless march of forgetfulness. It became clear that Donna Carmen had used that notebook as an anchor, trying to hold on to the memories that Alzheimer's was slowly erasing. In several passages, Donna Carmen reflected sadly on the disease, revealing the anguish of watching her memories fade away. As Isabella delved deeper into each page, she discovered an even more profound aspect of Donna Carmen's life: her passion for music. Amidst the reflections and recollections, there were song lyrics and sketches of melodies, signs of an artistic soul that found expression in music. She wasn't just a mother facing a devastating disease, but also a composer whose feelings and thoughts translated into musical notes. Then, Isabella came across a special dedication to Diego, a song that Donna Carmen had written for her son. The lyrics were simple but laden with emotion. "In your eyes, I find my light, like a star shining in the sky. Your smile is my peace, the luck that life gave me. You've grown up, my boy, but in my heart, I always keep you. With love, I wrap you in my arms, and I love you without fear of loving. My little bird, fly high, fly far away. Go live your life, for even from afar, I'll always keep you, and through these notes, I'll always reach you." When she finished reading, Isabella closed the notebook, feeling deeply moved by what she had just discovered. That song was not just a mother's tribute to her son. It was a reflection of Donna Carmen's life, her unconditional love for Diego, and her passion for the arts. But now, everything that once defined who she was stood on the brink of being forgotten. Isabella realized she had found something truly valuable. She felt she needed to do something to help, but knew she had to think carefully before acting. With that determination in mind, night fell, and Diego finally returned from work, happy to see the girl again. He suggested a walk through the woods, an attempt to recapture the tranquility they had experienced the previous night. For Isabella, this seemed like the perfect moment to share what was now occupying all her thoughts. As they walked together through the woods, Isabella felt the courage growing within her to bring up a subject that piqued her curiosity. Diego, Mrs. Carmen, she used to compose music, didn't she? The question slipped out softly, in a tone that tried to be casual, though her restless hands betrayed her anxiety about the answer. Diego was surprised by the question and paused for a moment, trying to understand how the girl could know this. Yes, she was a very talented composer. Her music was truly beautiful. But how did you find that out? He asked with sincere curiosity. Oh, while I was exploring the house, I ended up seeing a guitar in her room. It was totally by accident. I promise? Isabella said quickly, stumbling over her words as she tried to explain. I love music, she added, trying to divert any suspicion. Diego visibly relaxed, a gentle smile forming on his face. She really loved to play and compose. It was her way of expressing everything she felt. Love, joy, sadness. When I was little, she even composed a song just for me. It went something like this. As Diego recalled these memories, he found himself transported to a simpler time, marked by affection and unconditional love. He began to hum the melody his mother had created especially for him. The music was sweet and serene, speaking of eternal love, hope, and protection. His voice, a little hesitant at first, soon gained strength, laden with deep emotions. Isabella listened in silence, absorbing the beauty of the melody. She felt that, through that music, she was connecting to a part of Dona Carmen's soul, something now shared with her. Inspired by the connection the music had created, Isabella decided to open up a little more. I can play the guitar too, you know. I've always been passionate about music, she said, a proud gleam in her eyes. Diego, surprised and delighted, looked at her with newfound admiration. Really? And how did you learn? You're so young. You must be very talented to learn so quickly. Isabella smiled, her face reflecting a mix of sadness and pride. My father taught me. He taught me many things. How to read, how to play, how to be strong, she said, her voice filled with gratitude and a touch of melancholy. Diego sensed the depth of the bond Isabella had with the memories of her father, a relationship clearly marked by love and longing. Moved by her story, Diego asked gently, "And your mother? Did she teach you many things too?" Isabella lowered her gaze, gathering her memories before answering. My father said she went to heaven right after I was born, she said in a delicate tone full of meaning. The angels needed her in heaven. I never really understood why, but she never came back, Isabella said, echoing with simplicity the words her father always used to comfort her. Then, when my dad got sick with his heart, he had to go too, and then I was left alone. The neighbors helped me for a while, but I knew that at some point I would have to take care of myself. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. Isabella's words struck Diego deeply, revealing a childhood marked by challenges no child should face. However, the strength that shone through in her story was like a beacon of hope, a resilient flame that continued to burn despite the hardships of the past. Isabella, you are incredibly strong. I'm sorry for everything you've been through, but now you're here, and you don't have to face things alone anymore, Diego said, offering not only his support but also the promise of a new family. The conversation, though filled with emotions and difficult revelations, ultimately strengthened the bond between them. For the first time in a long while, Isabella felt welcomed and safe, realizing that, with Diego by her side, she could start a new life. And Diego, deeply moved by Isabella's strength and story, decided that he would do everything in his power to ensure a better future for her. a silent promise of protection and care that he committed himself to fulfilling. After a walk through the woods, which served both to calm their emotions and to strengthen their connection, Diego led Isabella back to the mansion. His heart was full of thoughts but also warmed by the girl's presence. Gently, he prepared her for bed, making sure she felt comfortable and safe in her new temporary home. As he watched her fall asleep, Diego felt a deep protective instinct growing within him, a desire to give her everything life had denied her. As he left Isabella's room, Diego walked with determined steps, feeling a new resolve in his heart. Crossing paths with Rosario in the hallway, he couldn't hold back the urgency to share what he was thinking. "Rosario, I've made an important decision. I want to officially adopt Isabella," Diego declared, his voice firm and resolute. Rosario, always practical and somewhat skeptical, reacted with a mix of surprise and concern. "Adopt the girl? Diego, are you sure? It's a huge responsibility, with everything you already have to deal with." "I'm not sure you're really prepared for this," she replied, hesitant, not just worried about the challenges this decision would bring, but also questioning whether Diego was ready to take on such a significant commitment. Diego wasn't shaken by Rosario's concerns. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," he affirmed with a firmness that shone in his eyes. "Isabella has brought something that was missing in my life. I can offer her a home, a family, and I believe she has much to contribute to my life as well." Rosario watched Diego closely, looking for any sign of hesitation or doubt, something that might be considered sensible. But instead, what she saw was a man transformed by the presence of a child, someone willing to completely change his life's path for her. "Diego, I just want you to think carefully. Adoption isn't a decision to be made on impulse. You need to be prepared for all the joys and challenges that it will bring." Diego nodded, acknowledging Rosario's concerns, but his determination remained unshaken. "I understand. It will be challenging, but I'm ready for it. Isabella deserves a chance to have a better life, and I want to be part of that change." The sincerity in his words was unmistakable, and Rosario realized that Diego was speaking from the heart. However, the following day, an unexpected event would serve to reinforce this conviction even further. The next morning, Isabella woke up with a new sense of determination. During breakfast, while Rosario served the meal in her usual silence, Isabella saw an opportunity to address a matter that had been on her mind. "Rosario, do you think there's any way to help Dona Carmen remember things again?" Isabella asked, her innocence mixed with a stubborn hope. The question caught Rosario off guard, causing her to pause for a moment. The reality of the situation reflected in her expression before she responded. "Dear, Dona Carmen's illness, Alzheimer's, has no cure. Over time, her condition has worsened. It's not something we can reverse," Rosario explained, trying to be honest so as not to create false hopes in the girl. Isabella listened to the explanation with an unusual maturity for her age, but the determination in her eyes didn't waver. "But there must be something we can do to help, even if it's just a little," she insisted, refusing to accept that nothing could be done. Rosario observed Isabella, impressed by the girl's determination. Even knowing the harsh realities of Dona Carmen's condition, there was something about Isabella's faith that was almost contagious. "Well, they say that music and old memories can sometimes reach parts of the mind we think are lost, but there are no guarantees," Rosario said, her tone a mix of hope and caution. Inspired by Rosario's words, Isabella began to formulate a plan. She remembered Dona Carmen's notebook of songs and the melody Diego had hummed the previous night. Maybe, she thought, music is the key to awakening Dona Carmen's dormant memories. Determined, Isabella decided she would try to use music to help. With this new mission in mind, Isabella, with the strength of her childlike will, managed to convince Rosario to let her spend the day with Dona Carmen. Armed with hope and a plan, she entered the room where Dona Carmen spent most of her days, a silent sanctuary of memories slowly fading away. At first, Isabella tried to start a conversation with Dona Carmen, talking about the day and small details that she hoped might spark some reaction. However, her initial efforts resulted only in a one-sided conversation, with Dona Carmen remaining in her armchair, motionless, her gaze fixed on a distant point. Undeterred by the lack of response, Isabella pressed on with her plan, shifting the focus of the conversation to something she believed was close to Dona Carmen's heart: music. "Dona Carmen, I saw a notebook in your room. It was full of songs you composed, wasn't it? They're so beautiful," she said with genuine admiration. "Do you remember when you wrote them?" Isabella spoke about the songs with enthusiasm, describing the lyrics she had read and the melodies Diego had shared with her, hoping that mentioning these old passions might spark some recognition in Dona Carmen's eyes. "The song you made for Diego, I heard him sing it. So beautiful. It speaks of love and hope," Isabella continued, trying to reach Dona Carmen's soul through her words. Despite all her efforts, Dona Carmen's reaction remained unchanged, her gaze distant, as if she were in a parallel world out of Isabella's reach. However, the girl didn't let this discourage her. She understood that, even without a visible change, these moments of sharing could be meaningful. Determined, she resolved to try another way, believing that music and the love it represented had the power to overcome the barriers imposed by the illness. It was then that Isabella had another idea. She left and returned to Dona Carmen's room with the lady's diary in her hands. She believed that perhaps, by seeing her own lyrics and melodies, Dona Carmen might find a way back to the memories that the disease was trying to erase. Carefully, Isabella opened the notebook. "Look, Dona Carmen," she said, positioning the notebook so that the lady could see the writings. "These are your songs. Do you remember writing them? They're really beautiful." With hope in her voice, Isabella began to recite the verses of the songs, putting emotion into every word she spoke. However, despite all the effort and feeling she put into the reading, Dona Carmen remained unchanged. She stayed still, her gaze lost, as if she were in a distant place, unreachable to those around her. The lack of response didn't discourage Isabella. On the contrary, it fueled her determination to find a way to reach Dona Carmen's heart. Convinced she needed to try something different, Isabella went back to the wardrobe in the room. As she explored its contents once more, her eyes lit up when she discovered a box full of music notebooks hidden next to the old guitar. It was like finding a forgotten treasure, the keys to the melodies that accompanied the lyrics she had read. Isabella took one of the notebooks and began to flip through the pages filled with musical notes. Each sheet seemed to hold a promise, a chance to reach Dona Carmen's dormant mind. "Maybe this will work," Isabella thought, forming a new plan in her mind. If the words alone couldn't penetrate the barrier of the disease, perhaps music in its purest form could. Determined to put her idea into practice, Isabella began comparing the song titles in the sheet music with the lyrics in Dona Carmen's diary. When she finally found a match, a mix of anxiety and excitement filled her. With Dona Carmen's guitar in hand, Isabella tried to play and sing the songs, believing that the combination of melody and lyrics might awaken some memory in the lady's mind. Even so, despite her efforts and the growing confidence with which the melodies flowed from her fingers, Dona Carmen showed no reaction. Isabella realized that perhaps her lack of familiarity with the exact way to play the songs was hindering the connection she so desperately sought. But the young girl didn't let this deter her. She persisted, trying different songs and adjusting her voice to the melody as best she could. The day turned to afternoon, and Isabella had to pause her mission for lunch, only to return later, determined to continue. As night fell, she was still by Dona Carmen's side, singing and playing. Her fingers were sore and her throat dry, but her spirit refused to yield to discouragement. Each chord she played was a silent plea for Donna Carmen, even if only for a brief moment, to return to the world that music had once created for her. As the night wore on, Isabella finally took a break. Her fingers ached, and her heart was heavy with frustration. Despite all her efforts, the response she so desperately wanted from Donna Carmen had yet to appear. Sitting on the floor in silence, with the guitar by her side, Isabella felt the weight of exhaustion and disappointment. But in the midst of the quiet, a new idea came to her like a flash of inspiration. The moment Isabella had shared with Diego in the woods, along with the song his mother had composed especially for him, came back to her mind like a beacon of hope. That was the only song whose melody and rhythm she knew for sure. With renewed determination, Isabella searched through the sheet music, desperately looking for the song. Finally, among the pages yellowed by time, she found the precious sheet with the notes of the song dedicated to Diego shining before her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Isabella felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation as she positioned her fingers on the guitar strings. Carefully, she began to play the first notes, letting the melody flow more easily this time, each chord filling the room with an emotional depth she hoped would reach Donna Carmen's heart. Then, with a clear and determined voice, Isabella began to sing the verses she had memorized. And it was in that moment, as the music filled the air, that something different shone in Donna Carmen's eyes. For an instant, the fog that enveloped her mind seemed to lift, and she slowly turned her head towards Isabella, as if waking from a long, deep sleep. Donna Carmen's eyes fixed on the girl, and for a brief moment, a spark of recognition lit up her gaze. As this scene unfolded, Diego was returning home after a long and tiring day at work. His thoughts centered on Isabella and the small changes her presence had brought to the mansion. Upon arriving, his first instinct was to look for the girl. When he realized she wasn't in her room, a silent worry began to grow within him, and he hurried to seek answers. He approached Rosario, the tension evident in his voice. "Rosario, have you seen Isabella? She's not in her room," he asked, the concern clear in his tone. Rosario, who was busy organizing some items, turned to him with a serene expression. "Yes, Mr. Diego. She's in Donna Carmen's room. She spent the whole day there trying to help in some way," she replied with a hint of approval in her eyes. "Help? What did she do?" Curiosity mingled with concern in Diego's voice. The idea of Isabella spending the entire day with Donna Carmen intrigued and worried him. Rosario let out a light sigh, choosing her words carefully. "Isabella spent the day playing guitar and singing to Donna Carmen. It seems she found your mother's diary and sheet music and decided to sing to her. Something worth seeing. Come, I'll show you." Rosario then led Diego down the hallway towards Donna Carmen's room. As they walked, Diego felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The idea that Isabella might have found a way to reach his mother, who had been lost in her own world for so long, seemed almost unbelievable, like a miracle was about to happen. "Rosario, did it really work? Did my mother show any signs of improvement?" Diego asked, his heart caught between hope and the fear of the answer. Rosario looked at him with a serious and thoughtful expression. "Not that I noticed when I last saw them. Donna Carmen was as she always is, with no apparent changes. But what matters is Isabella's effort and intention." Diego's disappointment was palpable, and he let out a resigned sigh. But as he prepared to leave, something unexpected interrupted his thoughts. A soft melody, accompanied by two voices in harmony, echoed down the hallway. Diego stopped abruptly, immediately recognizing his mother's voice in a song he never imagined he would hear again. His heart raced, flooded by a wave of emotions. Surprise, hope, and a nostalgia so deep he could barely contain it. Driven by this newfound hope, Diego hurried down the hallway, guided by the sound that seemed to call to him. As he reached the door of the room, he witnessed a scene he never thought possible. His mother, Dona Carmen, singing alongside Isabella, united by the music they shared. The same song his mother had composed for him years ago now served as a link, connecting the past to the present in a way he could never have predicted. Tears began to stream down Diego's face, each one carrying years of longing, love, and the pain of a loss he had never fully overcome. Seeing his mother so present, so alive in that moment, even if only for an instant, brought him indescribable joy and a relief that seemed almost unattainable. And seeing Isabella, the young girl who had managed to touch Dona Carmen's heart in a way he thought impossible, only reinforced Diego's conviction that she should be part of his family. Diego stood motionless at the door, absorbing every note, every word, as the music filled the room and warmed his heart. When the last notes faded, the silence that followed was charged with intense emotion. Dona Carmen, with a clarity in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time, turned her gaze to Diego. The smile she gave him was a rare gift, a reflection of the affection she still held for him. "Diego, dear, don't cry like that. It'll look like someone hurt you," she said, her voice delicate but surprisingly firm. Those words, as unexpected as they were precious, made Diego's tears flow even more intensely. He smiled through the tears, a smile that carried years of pain, love, and repressed longing. Unable to contain the flood of emotions, he rushed to embrace his mother, holding her with all the love and longing he had kept inside for so long. Isabella, watching the scene, couldn't fully comprehend the depth of Diego's pain and joy, but she was equally moved by the moment. Without realizing it, she too began to cry, sharing in the intense emotion that united everyone in that room. Rosario tried to hide the tears that threatened to escape, but the emotion of the reunion touched her heart just as deeply as it did the others. That brief moment of lucidity was an unexpected gift for Diego, a moment of hope amid the darkness that his mother's illness had brought. However, like all fleeting things, Dona Carmen's clarity didn't last long. Diego watched, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness, as the light in his mother's eyes slowly faded, leaving her once again trapped in the silence and distance that had become her reality in recent years. Before leaving, Diego leaned down and kissed his mother's forehead tenderly, a gesture of farewell to that brief but meaningful moment. Turning to Isabella, who watched with a look of pride for what she had achieved, Diego extended his hand and said, his voice still marked by emotion, "Let's take a walk in the woods, Isabella. I think we both need some fresh air." The girl, wiping the tears that still shone in her eyes, agreed and took Diego's hand. As they walked together under the canopy of trees, the silence between them was filled only by the sound of their footsteps on the soft earth. It was a silence that spoke more than words could express, offering space for both to process the intense emotions the day had brought. But moved by deep gratitude, Diego finally broke the silence, his voice still laden with emotion. "What you did today, Isabella, was something extraordinary. I don't know how to express my gratitude for giving me that moment with my mother." Isabella squeezed Diego's hand more tightly and responded with a shy smile. "I just wanted to help," she said with the simplicity of someone who expects nothing in return. "But I was really happy to see you two together like that. It was beautiful and I'm glad I could do it. You seem so happy." Diego looked at Isabella with a genuine smile, reflecting the happiness that still warmed his heart. The moment shared with his mother remained alive within him, reinforcing a decision he had made, a decision that would profoundly and permanently change the course of their lives. "Isabella," he began, drawing the girl's attention with an affectionate seriousness in his voice, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how you came into my life so unexpectedly, and all of this led me to an idea that I'd like to share with you." Isabella, intrigued and a bit anxious, looked at Diego, waiting for his next words. "What do you have in mind, Diego?" she asked, her expression reflecting a mix of expectation and concern. Diego stopped abruptly, turning to Isabella with a serious expression, wanting her to feel all the sincerity and affection in his gaze. "Isabella, how would you feel if I adopted you? If you became officially my daughter?" Isabella's reaction was immediate and full of emotion. Her eyes widened in surprise, but they soon filled with a radiant glow of joy. "Really? You want to be my new dad?" Her voice could barely contain the excitement, and a wide smile spread across her face. "Yes, really," Diego replied, mirroring the girl's smile. "I would love for you to be part of my family, Isabella. You're already my daughter in my heart, but I want to make it official so everyone knows." With a shout of joy, Isabella jumped into Diego's arms, hugging him with all her strength. "I would love that, Diego. Being your daughter and living in this house is going to be amazing. Having a dad again is a dream." Her voice, choked with emotion, was full of happiness and anticipation for the future that awaited her. As they walked through the woods, now connected by a new and deep bond, both felt a lightness and a renewed sense of hope. For Diego, the decision to adopt Isabella was a significant step toward a future filled with love and possibilities. For Isabella, it was the promise of a home and a family she had longed for. United by music, by destiny, and now by the promise of adoption, they returned to the mansion, ready to begin a new chapter in their lives. In a world where hope often seems fragile, on the verge of being swept away by adversity, the story of Isabella and Diego is a testament to the transformative power of love, determination, and compassion. A few weeks after that unforgettable day, Diego dedicated himself to formalizing Isabella's adoption. The speed with which everything happened was a testament not only to his determination but also to the certainty he felt about this decision. Isabella, now officially part of the family, began living under the loving care of Diego and, surprisingly, Rosario as well. The mansion, which was once silent and empty, now vibrated with the joy and energy of the girl. Her thirst for learning and her brilliant intelligence brought constant pride to Diego and, unexpectedly, even Rosario found a new purpose in helping Isabella with her studies and discoveries. The moments Isabella spent with Dona Carmen, playing and singing, became a source of comfort for everyone in the mansion. Even though brief, these moments of lucidity were a balm for the scars left by the disease. For Diego, they were a sign that, despite the distance created by Alzheimer's, true love is never lost. Thus, the routine in the mansion changed completely. Each day was filled with learning, music, shared laughter, and moments of gratitude. Diego, Isabella, Rosario, and even Dona Carmen, in her rare moments of clarity, formed a family united not just by blood but by the heart. In the end, this story is a perfect example of how, even in the most unexpected circumstances, it's possible to find and build a family. Isabella's adoption wasn't just a new chance for her, but also for Diego, who found a new purpose and joy in life. Together, they showed that even in the face of adversity, love, happiness, and belonging are always possible. In that mansion, now full of life and love, every day was a celebration, made possible by the strength of love and the magic of forming a family.